Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first Frank and Stan chat of 2021. And as you can see this morning, it's Frank Norris with his good friend Stan Johnson. Good morning, Stan.
Good morning and Happy New Year to everyone.
Yes, Happy New Year to you all.
I did get something that said, dear sir, having had 5 days free trial of 2021, I wish to send it back.
Yeah. So I think the thing here is that we have experienced another highly traumatic week, and Stan and I were intending to offer New Year resolutions at this chat, but we've decided that again events have overtaken our good plans, and so we're going to sort of cover as best we can what has happened in education and more widely over the last 7 days. But before we do, well, Stan, anything caught your eye? Oh no, shall I go first? Let me go first.
Go on, you go first.
Yeah, I mean, well, what's caught my eye this week is really just the having to look after 4 grandchildren because of the lockdown now. We're in this extended bubble, and I had the pleasure of doing some home educating for our gorgeous 9 and 6-year-old grandchildren this week, and we watched a program on Arlene and I are very sad, we on BBC4 there's this guy, the sort of the happy painter. It's a mid-1970s video of a guy just producing a sort of an oil-based or acrylic painting on an easel, and it takes about 30 minutes, and it's staggering the way it develops.
Is it the one where he's not actually looking at anything, he's
just
making it up?
It is. Anyway, I said to the eldest grandchild, look, have a look at this, and she was enthralled by it. And unfortunately, we had a couple of frames and some paints, and she and her younger sister produced the most amazing paintings. I actually have them as a screenshot on my phone now, but actually what caught my eye is, actually if you inspire the children, give them the right materials, and encourage them. And I did prompt her a little bit, and I'm not a painter, but I'd seen stuff on the program that I noticed that she didn't, and we just chatted about it. The quality of the work is amazing. So I think that I can honestly say that probably the best bit of art she's produced this academic year has probably been produced in the last few days, by watching at home a television program. So the power of home working, home learning, was really profound, I think, on those two. So what's caught your eye this week?
It's something called the Peter Principle, which was developed by somebody called Lawrence J. Peter. And it's the principle that people are promoted in most organizations to the point where they are incompetent in their job. Because you get promoted in the principle for what you're doing now. You're very good at what you're doing now, so you win promotion. And you continue to be promotion through a corporate system until you're no longer good enough to be promoted. Yeah. And therefore, the point at which you stop is where you are no longer competent.
Do you know, it's funny, I don't know who you're talking about here, Stan.
Can't think, but I'll come on to my second.
Can I just say one thing before you do? Is I was having a Zoom call last night with a colleague I have the deepest respect for, who I think has really contributed a lot to education over the last 20 years, and that colleague talked about the imposter syndrome. And when you were talking there are times when you don't feel comfortable about where you're at, and at times you wonder whether or not this is because it's you and because it's actually you're not good enough, but also you then wonder whether or not you just don't fit in, and actually that bit about not fitting in is probably the most interesting bit of that sense of imposter syndrome for me, because there's actually things there about your history, your heritage, your values, your principles, your politics, all of this, and your parenting skills and all of this sort of stuff. It all feeds into that sort of imposter syndrome. So as you were saying about that, getting promoted until you're incompetent, I think there along the way, there may well be periods of imposter syndrome feeding in for whatever reason.
Except for imposter syndrome tends to be for people who are competent because they are aware that their skill set might, or they believe their skill set might not be good enough for the post they're doing. Whereas this is actually linked to that.
This is even worse.
The Dunning-Kruger effect is exactly the opposite of imposter syndrome. And it's based around a very famous man called MacArthur Wheeler, that you've probably never heard of.
No.
He was a bank robber. And he was videoed robbing 2 banks in the same day. The police put the video out in America, and they tipped off about him within minutes. When he was arrested, he said, "You can't have videoed me. I wore the juice."
I wore the
juice. He had put lemon juice on his face. And the logic being that lemon juice you can do invisible writing with, that lemon juice on his face would prevent the cameras from seeing his face.
Oh gosh.
And he'd even tested it. He wasn't daft. He tested it with a Polaroid camera and taken pictures while he'd had lemon juice all over his face, and there was no picture on the resulting of his face, probably because, as he said afterwards, it hurts your eyes so much you can't see. So Dunning and Kruger looked at this incredible incompetence and tested it and came up with the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is essentially you are so incompetent that you cannot recognize your own incompetence.
But it was interesting because
without a leap onto education, I can't think of the link there at the moment. I'm sure there's one somewhere sitting behind a rather large desk with a whip at the front.
I know. But it was really interesting as you were saying that. I remember when we went. I do watch American TV a little bit, and yesterday there was Stephen Colbert spoke about how foolish the rioters were when basically they were videoing themselves in Capitol. Saying I'm George, I'm from Arizona, and putting it out on social media. So as he said, it's a bit like somebody saying, well, I'm a bank robber, I'm gonna sort of, and I'm Frank from Cheadle-Hugh, here I am, I'm a great guy, I mean, it's in a way it does make you feel as though the lunatics have got hold of the asylum, doesn't it, really, when you see this sort of stuff going on. And in a way, this is, I actually sort of was thinking about a subject when I was watching this about media studies, and thinking, I never ever taught media studies. And in fact, I have inspected media studies lessons in the past. But there was this sort of like, if ever there was a time when young people need a course in media studies, it is now. And actually it was interesting. I know that the reasons why, and I probably went along with them through ignorance, is that media studies is a bit of a soft subject. There's no real knowledge to it. That it's all a bit flappy and floppy, and it's all this sort of lefty stuff. But actually, if ever there was a time now when young people would need to understand, what the truth. I mean, the outcome of all of this, as we saw in the States, I feel to me is a bit like cult, and actually it's a cult, and actually, people can't see or don't want to see or don't want to watch stuff that they don't agree with, so they just reinforce all the rubbish on themselves, and it just embeds itself deeply. So if ever there was a time
doesn't this link back, Frank, to when you said it, it's seen as a soft subject. Equally, there are a lot of exams that people take in things like hairdressing, makeup, and that were all deemed to be far too easy, far too soft, distorting the figures. And those are the very people now who who are basically the only level that's operating.
Yeah.
Well,
but
apart from lockdown,
at the end of the day, though, the issue is if you think that, make the assessment harder.
yeah,
Don't get rid of the subject. If there is a demand for the subject, don't get rid of that demand. Just make it more difficult. If you feel as though there's not enough substance to it, well, strengthen the curriculum. But actually, there probably was.
Don't use it as a measure.
No, I know. But the thing is,
actually think of the people that want to do that exam, because that's what they want to do, and stop saying, but that will distort the school's results.
But I have to say that, I mean, I'm not. There were, and I'm glad that the government have taken steps to eradicate, gaming on all of that on that front. Because the stakes were, well, probably the accountability framework is not wasn't fit for purpose. And so in effect, I'm pleased that they've done that. But actually, the key point here, it goes back to what Jenny Webb said, one of our guests early in the year, about the reason why I teach English language and literature is because I don't want the kids to be hoodwinked. That will stick with me. That for a long time, her sense that what she was doing was, by offering that insight, she was not just teaching English, she was teaching civil society, respect, and actually sort of like a sense of ability to know how to influence those who have got the power. So I think that for me it was just around the media studies thing. It was just
I used to teach that as part of English. When you looked at the words that advertisers it was at the time, it wasn't politicians or news broadcasters. It was, where does this advert, is it truthful? Well, yes, it's not telling a lie, but it's not, nothing is stronger than.
Yes.
Does that mean that this is the strongest? Not necessarily. It doesn't mean it's strong. Of all those we tested, how many? It's those kind of things. I used to call them weasel words in my time, and the class had to dig out the weasel words from each of these adverts and such, and then do their own.
Well, let's look back then this week, shall we?
Yeah, UK or USA?
Should we start with UK?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that got to be difficult. Was it James O'Brien says, told you so. That I told. Yeah. But actually, you and I were predicting a long time ago that the events that occurred on the 5th of January, where following schools going back for one day, primary schools, they were going to close. And I thought it was disingenuous of the Prime Minister yesterday to say that actually, when he was told, I think it was very, very late in December, that actually, we then acted. Well, I'm really sorry, but if you haven't been looking at the same graphs I've been looking at, no. Because as soon as we came out of that early 2nd of December lockdown, infection rates were going up quicker than they were prior to that. So something would have told me we've got to put it back on, because what we're doing is we're just heading up now at a faster rate than we were before.
I mean, for me, Frank, it's not purely the lockdown. It's this, I don't know how you describe it, blank thing. This will happen. We if we take the exams, and I know it's nice to say we spoke and it's on video somewhere, saying, right now we need to put in some moderated pieces of work into high schools so that they've got a database by which, if the exams can't go ahead, which we predicted would happen, there's something there that's been moderated, that high schools have worked in groups of 4 or 5 to share moderation across, and they'd have something that had some credibility.
But actually,
positive that was October time.
It was, and the issue here is that it's this dogma thing again, isn't it? We're doing exams. No, we're not going to talk about anything else other than doing the exams, And so you and I have seen on social media people going, absolutely, supporting the government's position over exams, and actually as if we are the people that don't really know what we're talking about. You know, it's just, and people, and what does do my head in is when people have never led a school actually telling me that actually their view is right over the exams issue. You know, I'm thinking to myself, oh, come off it. I mean, this bit here is about someone has put you up to this, or either you are so cozy with the government that you cannot bring yourself to say anything that is against the party line.
But I can live with, we are, you know, definitely trying to get the exams done. But to mitigate anything that goes wrong, we have a plan B that we've been working on for several months. And how hard is that to say, you know, let's, you know, get the civil service, get schools. I mean, you wouldn't need many high schools to say, can you work up a series of papers that might be used in this event?
Yeah, but actually most schools will have a decent understanding of where roughly those boundaries are. You know, bearing in mind,
my point was to give it some credibility alongside, so we don't get back to the, well, some schools have given everybody A's. Well, we can hit that. We could have hit that last September.
Well, that's where the bloody media studies are needed, isn't it? But actually, that was not true.
No, it wasn't true.
That was not true, and you know, I'm tired of people saying things that are not true. You know, I'm tired of that, and actually the issue is I'm tired of people saying something about, you know, what is definitely going to happen. I mean, I feel for the DFE staff. The permanent secretary must have spoken to all the staff the day before saying we are carrying on with exams, you know, this is going to continue, and that night that decision was overturned.
Apparently, from what I've read, people in the DFE weren't aware that Boris Johnson was going to cancel the exams at that point. So was Gavin Williamson informed?
No.
Did he learn at the same time?
It does make you think that actually, that, you know, the Secretary of State for Education, bearing in mind that that is a very significant role at the moment, but historically has not been one of the top table. It's not part of that inner sanctum, but actually that feels as though that's continuing. And so we've currently got, you know, senior government ministers, you know, around that top table, one of whom, Michael Gove, has been an education secretary. You know, I think that there is probably, he's being pushed around all over the place. And I do understand, I think we've differed on this, haven't we, that, you know, at the end of the day, a decision needs to be made on lockdown, and actually, you know, that the education secretary needs to be part of that decision, but obviously that person's not going to be making that decision. It's obviously, I would hope it's a cabinet agreed decision, but actually the issue here is that things can only happen once that decision's been made. And the point you're making here is that the department should have been saying, what if they change their mind? What is the position to go to? I mean, at the end of the day,
talking about taking notice of people who know what they're doing as opposed to what people think. You know, I know it's been mentioned lots of times, but nobody seems to be saying your job is now at risk. That Nick Gibb and Gavin Williamson threatened legal action against schools that closed early on the last 2 days before Christmas, citing the fact that children's education would put them back years. That now needs an inquiry as to what evidence they had and what they knew at the time. And I personally, I can't see why anyone with any honour would stay in a role.
I mean, at the end of the day, I'm wondering to myself, I mean, Gavin Williamson has been dismissed as a minister for lying, being untruthful. That's probably, untruthful. And actually, but in a way to the Prime Minister at the time. But actually now, he's now appointed to this really important position. And it's quite clear that we are not getting all of the story. The profession feels as though it's just being bounced all over the place. And all of what went before, all of that history around that minister is playing into my mind as to the level of confidence I have in what I'm hearing. You know,
I think 92% of polled teachers say he should go, and I know on one TV, I think it was, well, where were the other 8%? Were they asleep?
I know. But
I can't remember. Now, I've been in education a long time, and I think we've had bad education ministers previously, and ones I haven't agreed with. But I can't remember anybody appearing to be as incompetent as we're in the position we're in now.
I do. I mean, in some respects, there's an issue at the moment, isn't it? I think we tweeted about it yesterday. You responded to a tweet I had that I pushed out around whether children are pre-reception children, whether they should be included as part of the group of kids that should be back in school. And I had a look at the guidance. The guidance is contradictory, you know. And so in one bit it says for childcare, for childminders, if you are, you shouldn't actually be having children of school age. And in other parts of the guidance, it talks about, you know, nursery classes and this sort of stuff, where they ought to be. So it is contradictory.
Yeah.
But the issue here is that, you know, I'm not expecting Gavin Williamson to know all of that, but I am expecting those people who are paid as senior advisors with education backgrounds to be advising him.
Yeah.
And actually, I do think that there is an issue here around who is advising the minister, because whoever it is, it clearly doesn't understand early years well enough in order to be able to do that.
And absolutely agree. The other thing I think needs sorting out pretty rapidly is who's a key worker and who's vulnerable, because the local school to me has got 50% of its children in.
Yeah. Well, the problem now
you're trying to teach. You've got half a class to teach and half a class that you have to do 5 hours remote teaching with.
Do you want to get on to Ofsted?
Yeah, I was going to say, and then what else can we do to wind the teaching profession?
We've got the dagger in. What can we do now to twist it? You know, I mean, and without showing respect for what has been a remarkable achievement by, you know, 99.99999% of schools. What we're going to do is, I've heard about a school. I'm not going to tell you which one it is, or I'm not tell you how big it is. I don't tell you the circumstances around it, but they haven't quite stepped up to the mark. So what we're going to do is we're going to diss the whole lot of you.
Yeah, you know, we'll get parents to complain.
I mean, I don't know how. Again, I would be disappointed if Ofsted just nodded on that. And actually, I don't even know whether they knew. You know,
well, the other thing is, I'd like to see their framework that they've created and their evidence base to compare one against another and decide which is effective and which isn't.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing they can do is whether or not it's like a regulatory inspection where, you know, you basically ask, have you been delivering your 4 hours of home learning? And then they just say yes. Well, can we see your plan? There's your plan. Okay. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, even if they ask Mary or Bill at home, you know, actually, none of them will know whether it's any good or not. A parent may say to them, well, look, you know, there's been no work come home.
Yeah.
You know, but actually just address that with the school. You know, it's got to be a long chain of command before we start seeing inspectors phoning schools up wanting to inspect their home learning packs, you know.
Yeah, I mean, the most likely complaint, and the one that I pick up from people, is the other school down the road are doing A, B, and C, but my school are only doing A. It's not fair.
Yeah.
And the whole thing over live lessons versus recorded lessons, you know, can somebody not point out that it's actually quite difficult to have a class of 15 in school and 15 remote learners and do live lessons with everybody?
There was a very good tweet last night. It was it had a picture of a primary school Zoom screen with about 30 kids on it, and then it had a secondary school one with 15 kids on it, and there was just on the secondary one, it was just the teacher's face that you could see. All the others were just initials. You know what I mean? On the primary one, there was one with the cat on its head. There was one with the little brother was jumping across the screen. You know, I mean, all of this makes you realize, you know, live home learning, live is fraught with difficulty and distraction.
And
you know,
I mean, having said that, I mean, I've talked to a couple of teachers who've been doing it live and been very positive about, you know, the way it was organised. We're on at 9 o'clock. I've got all the children in front of me. I can see all 30 of them.
They're all fine. They all look happy.
Yeah, set them to work. I'm available if they come to their screen and touch screen. I'm there watching them, but I don't see them then again for another hour and a half. At which point we get back together again and we talk. So that's an effective way of doing it. But I'm in a middle class area where 90% plus of the children must have decent Wi-Fi, decent machines, etc. You cannot do that in an area where people are, you know, 5 or 6 children are crowded around the iPhone.
My phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then just to throw it in this week, BT offered vouchers for data. Yeah. Which the DFE, apparently it was too complicated to
well, there's the Northern Powers Partnership raised this way back in March, April. It was very clear at that time, you know, there was, I think it was a sense of there's not enough bandwidth to deal with this at the moment, you know. Yeah, that is shameful, isn't it, really? It takes us back to Edenred, doesn't it, as well, you know?
Yeah, well, that's the point, I think, that you then, you know, if you can't do it, if you're saying it's not possible to do this voucher scheme with data, why is it possible to do it with meals suddenly?
I know.
Through one company.
Yeah. I think we ought to end on an optimistic note, or at least a grateful note. I hear and speak to and read, you know, deep levels of admiration offered by parents and carers to what schools have done, and you know, whether or not Gavin Williamson, you know, it just doesn't sound as if he means it. That's the biggest problem for me when he says, "Oh, thank you," but actually, I hope I can convey, you know, genuine, deep respect for what teachers and schools have managed to achieve, you know, with 1 day's notice. 1 day.
I agree, Frank, and you know, I am, you know, we've both said we've never led a school through this kind of crisis, and I'm stunned at what they have managed to do. I'm in awe of the way they've organised it, but there is a wing of the media, I won't say a political wing, but a wing of the media that have got it in their heads that teachers are, we're back to the blob, the enemies of what's going on, and they're having an easy ride. And you do see on Twitter people saying, but they just want even longer holidays.
Yeah.
And nobody's really responding to that. Nobody from government is saying, you know, I'm fed up of hearing this kind of rubbish. We don't get much, although people in the NHS do say they get abuse on their Twitter things when they say how tired they are, etc. But we don't seem to have quite the same respect in the country for what teachers are doing.
I do think, though, that, you know, as I've got older, I do think we just need to be, as a profession, straight. And there is a lot. I mean, this week I was approached to see if we could find a school that would be willing to speak to a TV station about the shortage of laptops. Now, I have to say, there are people who say to me privately, well, yeah, there is a problem. We haven't got enough laptops, but they've got themselves into a position whereby they don't want to diss their community. They don't want to upset anybody. So very few people are willing to stand up and say the things in public that they'd be willing to say in private, for fear of upsetting a minister, a regional schools commissioner, or whatever. You know, it really is awful that we just need to tell the truth and say it as it is, and actually be strong together, because if we don't, then actually those press articles are just going to continue. You know, I don't care. I don't believe what half those newspapers say anyway. So why should we bother about it? And most of the parents who deal with these things, they know the school better.
Yeah, it's the Matt Busby, Alex Ferguson bit into it when Ferguson went to see Busby and said, I might have to quit the job that what I'm reading in the press is really doing for me. And Busby said, well, don't read it.
Absolutely. And actually, I'd say, you know, if head teachers together said, look, there is a newspaper here. I mean, I thought what Liverpool has done around the Hillsborough issue and the Sun is really impressive, you know. And actually, if newspapers will listen and change their tune when people don't buy them, don't use it, don't go on the Daily Mail website.
Last year we were going on, whenever was the last time we were in an airport, and we walk along, you know, the long corridor you go to actually get to your gate, and they have free papers all the way down. There were two lads in front of us, obviously from Liverpool, who were lifting the Sun out of each of those and dropping them in the bin next to them all the way along.
Yes. Okay, well, that's our rant for the week. We'll be back next week. We've got an odd thing. Our plans for next week may be affected, Stan, by the lockdown, particularly the one in the morning that we're planning to do. So I'll get back to you on that. But there will be a Frank and Stan chat next week, and you'll see who's on, because we're having to make changes to our arrangements. Yeah, if we've got a guest or not. But anyway, I hope everybody has a safe and profitable week this week, and we'll both see you back all next week. Take care.
Take care.